The sun, a molten smear on the bruised pre-dawn horizon, hadn't even fully cleared the murky steel-gray waters of the Gulf when Mason Carter, skipper and sole occupant of the fishing vessel Second Chance, first saw it. Just an indistinct speck at first, a dark, anomalous smudge against the vast, indifferent canvas of endless gray-blue, where the ocean on these hazy, humid Gulf mornings seemed to bleed seamlessly, indistinguishably into the equally featureless sky. Mason, a man whose face was a roadmap of sun-etched lines and whose hands were permanently calloused from a lifetime spent wrestling with nets, and lines squinted through the salt-caked windows of his small wheelhouse, his chipped enamel coffee mug halfway to his lips. 20 hard years navigating these often treacherous, always unpredictable waters from the Bay of Campeche to the Florida Straits, and he'd witnessed his fair share of strange, inexplicable sights. Rogue waves appearing from nowhere, ghost lights dancing on the horizon, even a pod of pilot whales inexplicably miles off their usual migration routes. But this was different. This felt wrong. The speck, he now realized with a jolt of adrenaline that cut through his morning lethargy, was moving. Purposefully. He set down his lukewarm mug with a clatter on the worn chart table and reached with a practiced, economical movement for the pair of battered, powerful binoculars that hung from a rusty nail near the captain's chair. He focused them, his knuckles white against the cracked rubber casing. Jesus H. Christ. He whispered the words, a shocked exhalation in the otherwise silent wheelhouse. It's a dog, a goddamn dog, swimming out here in the middle of nowhere. We're at least 112 nautical miles from the nearest spit of land. And it wasn't just paddling aimlessly, disorientedly, as if it had recently tragically fallen off somebody's fancy offshore yacht either. This animal, whatever its provenance, was moving. Its dark head held high above the choppy surface, its powerful shoulders working with a relentless, piston-like rhythm, its unseen legs churning through the considerable swells with a steady machine-like precision, as if it knew with an absolute, unwavering certainty exactly where it was going, as if it were on a mission. Mason dropped his binoculars with a curse and scrambled with surprising agility for a man his age toward the boat's controls. The sophisticated sonar array he'd been meticulously using to track a promising, deep-water school of migrating yellowfin tuna pinged softly, plaintively, forgotten in the sudden, urgent rush of this new, infinitely stranger reality. "Hold on, buddy," he muttered, his voice a low growl of concern as he spun the heavy wooden wheel of the Second Chance, hard to port, swinging the sturdy fishing boat around in a wide, protesting arc. "Just you hold on now. I'm coming for you." He'd nearly reached the struggling, solitary animal, the Second Chance cleaving through the choppy gray waves with a purposeful surge when it happened. The dog's powerful, rhythmic swimming faltered catastrophically. One labored stroke, then another weaker one, and then nothing. The dark, noble head, held so resolutely above the waves just moments before, disappeared beneath a particularly large white-capped swell. No, damn it all!" Mason roared into the wind, slamming the throttle lever hard forward, the old diesel engine groaning in protest as the boat surged ahead. He scanned the turbulent, indifferent water frantically, his experienced eyes narrowed against the wind and spray, desperately seeking any sign, any movement. His calloused, salt-roughened hands gripped the polished wooden wheel so tightly that his knuckles shone bone-white. 30 agonizing, heart-stopping seconds crawled by with the slowness of geological time. 45. A minute. Then, just as a cold, sickening despair began to settle in his chest, a sudden, violent splash erupted off the port side, not more than 20 yards away. The dog, by some miracle of endurance or sheer willpower, had resurfaced, coughing, sputtering clearly, struggling for air, but alive. Still alive. Mason didn't hesitate for a single precious second. He cut the engine abruptly, the sudden silence almost deafening after the roar of the diesel. He grabbed a long, wicked-looking gaff hook with one powerful sun-browned hand, and with the other, he expertly, efficiently tossed the heavy, knotted rope boarding ladder over the side of the second chance. By the time he reached the pitching, rolling edge of the deck, his old knees protesting, the exhausted dog was already at the hull, its front paws scrabbling, slipping with a desperate, frantic urgency against the slick, algae-covered fiberglass. "I got you, boy, I got you now." Mason grunted, his voice strained with the effort, as he leaned dangerously, precariously far over the low-side rail. He hooked the gaff carefully, expertly under the dog's heavy, waterlogged tactical vest. A vest that looked surprisingly intact, almost new despite its ordeal, and hauled upwards with a sudden explosive surge of adrenaline-fueled strength that surprised even him. The dog, a dead weight of sodden fur, muscle, and bone, came over the rail in a clumsy, ungraceful heap, collapsing onto the cluttered, fish-scented deck with a sound like a sack of wet cement. Water gallons of it pooled rapidly beneath its massive, trembling frame. A German Shepherd, Mason realized now as he knelt beside the creature, his own clothes instantly soaked through. And not just any German Shepherd. This one, as he'd already noted, wore specialized gear, professional military-grade equipment. The embroidered patch on the side of its sturdy black vest, clearly visible, now read in stark white lettering, "K9 Ghost, Special Operations Unit." Mason knelt down further, not even bothering to wipe the stinging saltwater spray from his weathered face, his mind reeling with 1,000 unanswered questions. "Where the hell did you come from, boy?" he whispered, his voice filled with a mixture of awe and profound disbelief. "What in God's name happened to you out there?" The dog ghost slowly, painfully lifted its magnificent head and looked up at him. And that's when Mason felt it. A sudden, inexplicable, visceral chill that had absolutely nothing to do with the damp morning air or his own soaked, shivering clothes. Because this wasn't the look of a merely grateful rescued animal. This wasn't a look of confusion or fear, or even simple relief. Those intelligent, deep-set amber eyes, though clouded with an almost unimaginable exhaustion, were intensely, unnervingly focused. They were determined. It was the look of an animal, of a being that was still thinking, still calculating, still assessing. Mason, in his long, often solitary life, had seen that exact same look before. On the faces of hardened soldiers returning from some forgotten brutal war, on the faces of grim-faced cops working a particularly horrific crime scene, on the faces of ordinary people pushed to the very brink of their endurance, people with a mission, a purpose, a driving force that sheer, bloody-minded failure simply wasn't going to stop. This dog was one of those. His hands, he noted with a strange attachment, were shaking slightly as he reached for the crackling, salt-corroded radio microphone mounted near the helm. "United States Coast Guard. United States Coast Guard, this is fishing vessel. Second chance call sign, Whiskey Alpha 39er72. Do you copy, over?" He paused acutely, suddenly aware of how utterly, certifiably crazy he was about to sound to the disembodied voice on the other end of the line. "Coast Guard, be advised, I am approximately 112 nautical miles southeast of Galveston. I have just recovered a police dog from the water. Repeat, a live K9 unit in full tactical gear. He was swimming, repeat, swimming in open water. Over." The ensuing static stretched for several long, pregnant seconds before a young, clearly confused, almost incredulous voice crackled back through the speaker. Second chance, say again, your last transmission. Did you say you recovered a police dog 100 miles offshore, over?" "Affirmative, Coast Guard." Mason confirmed, his voice grim. He glanced back at Ghost, who was now, with a visible, agonizing effort, struggling to push himself upright to get to his feet, despite his obvious, debilitating exhaustion. A German Shepherd male, intact, wearing a black tactical vest with K9 unit markings. He's alive, but in rough shape. No idea how long he's been out here in the water, but judging by his condition, it's been a damn long time. Over. Another longer pause. Mason could almost picture the young Coast Guard operator on the other end, probably fresh out of boot camp, trying to make sense of this bizarre, unprecedented report, probably thinking he was dealing with a drunk or a madman or both. Uh, Second chance, maintain your current position. We are dispatching a fast response wildlife patrol cutter to your confirmed coordinates. Their ETA to your location is approximately 45, that's 4 or 5 minutes. Keep the animals secured warm if possible and under close observation. And second chance, I repeat, do not approach any other vessels or make any attempts to leave your current location until our unit arrives. Acknowledge over. So, Mason acknowledged the transmission, then hung up the radio microphone, a deep frown creasing his already furrowed brow, as he processed that last, rather unusual, almost ominous instruction. Do not approach any other vessels. Why would they say that? What did they think he was going to do? He turned back to Ghost, who was now miraculously on his feet, unsteady, swaying his powerful body, trembling violently, with a combination of cold and extreme exertion, but standing. And his attention, Mason noted with another jolt of that strange, cold unease, wasn't on Mason, or on the relative safety of the boat, or even on the vast, unforgiving expanse of water he'd just been so miraculously pulled from. He was looking out with that same intense, unwavering, almost hypnotic focus, past the stern of the second chance towards the distant, hazy southern horizon, towards something unseen, something unknown, towards something important. And that's when Mason Carter realized, with a certainty that settled like a cold stone in the pit of his stomach, that this wasn't just a lost, unfortunate dog he had rescued. This was a dog with somewhere to be, something to do. This was a dog still very much on a mission. Officer Danny Vega's small, sparsely furnished apartment, usually a haven of neat, almost military order, looked like a goddamn crime scene. Empty pizza boxes, casualties of a 3-day vigil fueled by caffeine and despair, were stacked precariously on the worn Formica kitchen counter. Voluminous, dog-eared case files, printouts of nautical charts, and hastily scribbled incoherent notes were scattered like fallen leaves across the scarred surface of her cheap coffee table and the threadbare rug. The television, left on for company, muttered quietly, almost ignored in the background, a local news anchor droning on about a newly formed tropical storm gathering ominous strength somewhere near the Yucatan Peninsula. The blinds were drawn tightly shut despite the bright, insistent mid-morning sunlight attempting to penetrate the gloom, casting the cramped room in a perpetual artificial twilight that perfectly mirrored the darkness in Danny's soul. Danny hadn't slept, not in the nearly 48 hours since Ghost had disappeared. She'd eventually reluctantly gone home from the chaotic, rain-lashed Coast Guard station when her superior, Captain Reynolds, a man whose patience was as thin as his prematurely graying hair, had more or less directly ordered her to, his voice tight with a mixture of gruff sympathy and official exasperation. She'd showered off the clinging salt, the sweat, the grime of the futile night-long search, changed into a fresh, crisp uniform she didn't deserve to wear. But actual sleep, the blessed oblivion of unconsciousness that just wasn't happening. Not after Ghost, her partner, her shadow, her anchor in a world that often felt intent on capsizing her, had vanished without a trace into the storm-tossed, inky black waters of the Gulf. Her departmental issue smartphone sat accusingly on the frayed arm of the cheap thrift store couch, its screen spiderwebbed with cracks from when she'd hurled it in a fit of pure, unadulterated rage and despair against the plasterboard wall the previous night. She'd called the Coast Guard Operations Center repeatedly, incessantly throughout that first agonizing night, her voice growing hoarse, her pleas more desperate, until the on-duty watch commander, his own nerves clearly frayed by the demands of a major maritime incident and a brewing tropical storm, had finally curtly snapped at her. Officer Vega, for the last time, our active search and rescue patterns covered a comprehensive 20-mile radius from the confirmed incident site. The unexpected storm surge created swells in excess of 30 feet. Visibility for most of the search period was effectively zero. We had 4 of our own Coast Guard vessels taking on significant water, their crews in genuine peril. I understand your professional and personal attachment to your canine partner, officer, But we had human lives at stake. We had to make a call. She'd wanted to scream at him then, to unleash the torrent of grief and fury that was consuming her. She'd wanted to tell him that Ghost wasn't just some dog, some piece of easily replaceable departmental equipment. He was her partner, her confidant, her shadow, the only living being in her solitary, often chaotic life who'd ever had her back unequivocally, without question, without judgment. Instead, her voice dead hollow, she'd said, "Yes, sir. I understand, sir." In that flat, meticulously professional, utterly devoid of emotion tone that had cost her every last remaining ounce of her rapidly dwindling strength to maintain. The department, with its usual bureaucratic efficiency, had already processed the preliminary paperwork. K9 Unit Ghost Service Number K947, officially designated as Lost in the Line of Duty. They'd used the carefully chosen, legally ambiguous word, presumed. But Danny, a cop for 10 years, knew exactly what that meant in cold, hard, official terms. They'd given up. They'd written him off. She hadn't. Not completely. Not yet. Ghost. Her ghost had somehow survived 3 brutal, bloody combat tours in the mountains of Afghanistan with the Marines before being deemed psychologically unsuitable for further combat deployment. A euphemism she later learned for a dog too intelligent, too sensitive, too loyal to his fallen handler to be easily reassigned, and subsequently miraculously repurposed for civilian police work. He'd lived through building collapses during urban search and rescue operations, flash floods that had turned city streets into raging rivers, and most recently, a terrifying near-fatal tunnel cave-in during that high-risk narcotics raid down in Brownsville just last year. If any dog, any creature on God's green earth could possibly survive what had happened out there in the Gulf 2 nights ago, it was him. It was Ghost. But even she, in her darkest, most honest moments, had to admit the odds were overwhelmingly, impossibly stacked against him. A 30-foot storm surge, 0 visibility, miles from shore. No animal, however strong, however determined, could survive that. Could they? They'd been assisting a tense, high-stakes joint operation with the Coast Guard and DEA. A heavily laden, suspected cartel supply boat, a go-fast cigarette boat designed for speed and stealth, had unexpectedly violently capsized during a wild, high-speed nighttime pursuit through storm-tossed waters. In the ensuing chaos, strobe lights flashing erratically, massive waves crashing relentlessly over the pitching deck of their own pursuit vessel, men shouting urgent, panicked commands in English and Spanish. Ghost, reacting with his usual lightning speed and unwavering courage, had gone after one of the fleeing cartel runners, a key figure they desperately needed to apprehend. He'd launched himself a blur of focused canine fury across the treacherously slick rain-lashed deck and into the churning, inky black water. Danny had screamed his name, a raw, primal sound of pure terror. She'd nearly gone in after him, would have, without a second thought, if 2 burly, quick-thinking Coast Guard officers hadn't physically forcefully restrained her, dragging her kicking and screaming back from the rail. They'd searched for hours, a desperate, increasingly futile grid search, their powerful searchlights cutting useless, shifting swathes through the driving rain in the mountainous, unforgiving waves. They'd found nothing. No sign of Ghost. No sign of the cartel runner. Just the vast, empty, angry ocean. Her phone, the one with the cracked screen, suddenly shrilly rang, the unexpected sound startling her violently from the depths of her tormented memory. She didn't recognize the number, some unfamiliar 504 Louisiana area code, but she answered it anyway, her voice rough, hoarse, almost unused. Vega. Yeah, Officer Vega. This is, Mason Carter. The man on the other end of the line sounded hesitant, uncertain, as if he wasn't entirely sure he had the right person or if he was perhaps interrupting something. The Coast Guard, they gave me your number. Said, you're the primary handler for a K9 unit named Ghost. That right? Danny sat bolt upright on the couch so fast that her head spun the room, tilting precariously. Yes. She managed a single word, a breathless, explosive rush of air from her constricted lungs. Yes, that's right. Ghost is my partner. Is he? Well, ma'am, I just pulled him out of the Gulf about an hour or so ago. He was swimming, looked half dead, maybe more. But the tough old son of a... Well, he somehow made it to my boat. He's here. He's alive. She couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Her free hand gripped the worn, frayed edge of the cheap couch so hard that her knuckles turned a stark, bloodless white. A roaring sound filled her ears. "Hello, ma'am. You still there?" Mason Carter's concerned voice came as if from a great distance. I'm on my way." She finally managed her voice, a choked, strangled whisper, already on her feet, stumbling her legs, weak, uncooperative. "Where are you? Where are you docked?" "Well, that's the thing, ma'am. We're not docked yet. Still a good ways out. The Coast Guard, they're redirecting us to their station at Purdo down near the Intracoastal. Said they want to check the dog out themselves, get their vet to look him over before they arrange any further transport. Reckon you've got about an hour, maybe a bit more before we make landfall there." She was already grabbing her car keys from the hook by the door, shouldering blindly past the teetering towers of discarded pizza boxes, her mind racing a chaotic, unbelievable maelstrom of hope, fear, and dawning incredulous joy. "I'll be there. I'll meet you at Station Purdo." "Hey, Officer Vega." Mason Carter's voice caught her just as she was about to disconnect to throw the phone down and run. "Your dog, K9 Ghost. He's really something else. Something special. Never seen anything quite like it in all my years on the water. He's still trying to work, officer, even after everything he's clearly been through. Still on the job." The painful, burgeoning lump in her throat made it almost impossible to answer. "Yeah." She finally choked out tears, now streaming unheeded down her face. "Yeah, Mr. Carter, that's Ghost." The frantic, high-speed drive to the remote Coast Guard station, Purdo, located on a desolate, windswept stretch of the Texas coastline, was a complete, terrifying blur. Danny, her hands gripping the steering wheel, with a white-knuckled intensity, her foot pressed hard, unthinkingly to the floor, broke at least 6 major traffic laws, her official police badge flashing urgently, imperiously on her dashboard. She kept the car windows rolled all the way down, despite the oppressive, humid heat, as if the frantic, rushing torrent of air against her face would somehow help her to think more clearly, to process the impossible, miraculous news. Ghost was alive. Her ghost. Somehow, impossibly, miraculously, he was alive. When she finally, screeching to a halt in a cloud of dust and gravel, arrived at the small utilitarian Coast Guard station, Ghost was already on the main wooden dock, a thick insulated thermal blanket draped incongruously over his still shivering, emaciated frame. He was surrounded by a curious, murmuring knot of uniformed Coast Guard officers, several wildlife specialists in khaki, and a couple of local news reporters who had somehow inevitably already gotten wind of the strange, unfolding story. But even in the midst of that concerned, curious crowd, Ghost looked utterly, resolutely solitary, his noble head held high, his intelligent amber eyes alert, watchful despite the profound, bone-deep ordeal he had so clearly, so recently endured. His powerful ears, Danny noted with a fresh surge of love and pride, perked instantly, unmistakably, the very moment he caught her familiar, unique scent on the salt-laden breeze, even before she had fully stepped out of her car. "Ghost," she whispered, the single choked word containing everything. A universe of overwhelming relief, of profound, incredulous disbelief, of the crushing, unbearable weight of what might have been, what she had so feared had been. He rose then with a visible, painful effort on severely trembling, unsteady legs. His once sleek, dark sable fur, now matted in places caked with dried salt. His eyes fever-bright with a combination of exhaustion, dehydration, and something else, something. Danny recognized instantly an unwavering, unbreakable, indomitable spirit. But he was there. He was real. He was alive. Danny dropped to her knees on the rough, weathered planking of the dock, heedless of the splinters, The dirt, the curious, watching eyes wrapping her arms tightly, desperately around his thick, muscular neck, burying her face in his damp, reassuringly solid fur. His weary body sagged heavily against hers, a dead weight of utter exhaustion, as if he'd been holding himself together by sheer, raw, bloody-minded willpower, waiting, just waiting until she arrived, until he knew he was safe with her again. "You crazy, stubborn, magnificent bastard," she murmured, her voice thick with unshed tears. Her words muffled against his fur, not caring in the slightest who heard or saw her uncharacteristic display of raw, unfiltered emotion. "You came back. You actually came back to me." Someone nearby, a young Coast Guard ensign, perhaps, clapped softly, respectfully. Another older voice, Mason Carter's, probably muttered something rough but appreciative about unwavering loyalty, about a bond that transcended mere training. "Damn, ma'am, that's just different. Special. Serbatim." But as Danny, her initial wave of overwhelming relief beginning to subside, ran her trembling, practiced hands expertly over Ghost's lean, powerful body, checking meticulously for injuries, for broken bones, for signs of internal trauma, her ingrained police training, her cop instincts kicked sharply, unavoidably back in. The dog was exhausted, certainly dangerously so. He was dehydrated, malnourished, battered by the sea. But there was something else going on here, something beyond simple survival. He wasn't trying to rest, to recover, to conserve his rapidly dwindling energy. He kept shifting restlessly against her, trying to stand, to pull away, kept turning his noble head insistently towards the open, unforgiving water, as if someone was still out there. Something important, something he hadn't finished with. That's when she felt it. A small, hard, unfamiliar, rectangular lump beneath the reinforced waterproof pocket flap of his tactical K9 vest. A lump that was still there, incredibly, almost impossibly, despite everything he had clearly endured. Her blood ran suddenly, icily cold. She carefully, with fumbling gloved fingers, opened the sealed waterproof pocket and removed a small, sophisticated black electronic device. Not departmental issue, definitely not something she or anyone in her unit had ever put on Ghost operational gear. A military-grade long-range GPS tracker, the kind favored by high-level smugglers, by covert intelligence operatives, by cartels. Her heart hammered against her ribs. "Ghost? What in God's name did you find out there?" She whispered, her voice barely audible, even to herself. Ghost couldn't answer, of course, but his lean, powerful body went suddenly perceptibly tense beneath her searching hand. His unwavering attention fixed with a laser-like, almost terrifying intensity on the vast, indifferent expanse of open water. It was a look she recognized intimately, a look she had seen hundreds, perhaps thousands of times during their intensive, relentless training sessions, during their dangerous real-world deployments. That specific, unmistakable look that always, without fail, said, "There's something out there you need to see, something important, something dangerous." And suddenly, with a sickening, dawning clarity that chilled her to the very bone, Danny Vega understood. Ghost hadn't been swimming aimlessly, desperately for survival. He hadn't been lost. He'd been following something, or someone. He'd been tracking. The small makeshift veterinary unit at Coast Guard Station Purdo wasn't much to look at. Basically a cramped, converted storage room smelling faintly of antiseptic and despair, equipped with a collection of mismatched second-hand medical equipment and a single gleaming stainless steel examination table. But it was for now enough. Dr. Connors, the Coast Guard's perpetually overworked on-call contract veterinarian, a kind gray-haired woman with gentle hands and tired eyes, moved with a quiet, practiced efficiency as she meticulously examined Ghost, checking his core temperature, his dangerously elevated heart rate, his worryingly low blood oxygen saturation levels. The dog, to Danny's immense pride and relief, endured it all, with a stoic, almost regal patience, his gaze never leaving Danny's face, drawing strength, it seemed, from her constant, reassuring presence. "This is a truly remarkable animal, Officer Vega," Dr. Connors murmured, more to herself than to Danny, as she carefully, expertly checked Ghost's pupils for signs of concussion or neurological damage. Moderate to severe dehydration as expected. Several minor superficial lacerations and abrasions, most likely to the paw pads, consistent with prolonged exposure to rough seas and debris. But considering what he's clearly undeniably been through, she shook her head slowly, a look of profound, almost reverent disbelief in her tired eyes. His core vitals are surprisingly, almost miraculously stable. He's burned more calories in the last 48 hours than most domestic dogs would expend in a month. But astonishingly, nothing appears to be failing, no signs of organ shutdown. He's a fighter, this one, a true survivor. He's trying to go back out there. Doctor, Danny said, her voice quiet, strained more to herself perhaps than to the veterinarian. She hadn't taken her eyes off Ghost, not for a single second since they'd arrived at the station. Doctor, Connors nodded slowly, her gaze thoughtful, recognizing something deep, something unspoken in Danny's intense, almost desperate tone. Some working dogs, the truly exceptional ones, are like that, officer. They possess a drive, a focus, a sense of duty that, well, it defies easy explanation. They simply don't stop, can't stop until the job, whatever they perceive that job to be, is well and truly done. She finished her comprehensive examination and stepped back from the table, stripping off her latex gloves. Under normal circumstances, I'd strongly recommend a minimum of 24 to 48 hours of intensive supportive care. IV fluids, broad-spectrum antibiotics, strict cage rest, and continuous close monitoring. But frankly, Officer Vega, she sighed, a weary professional resignation in her voice. That ultimate decision in a case as unique as this one is considerably above my pay grade. He's your partner. Danny barely heard her. Her attention, her entire focus, was now riveted on Ghost's mud-stained, salt-encrusted tactical vests, which lay like some discarded relic on a nearby metal counter. The unfamiliar GPS tracker, she now knew with a chilling certainty, wasn't the only unexpected alien object hidden there. With freshly gloved hands, her own heart pounding a nervous tattoo against her ribs, she meticulously, painstakingly examined the vest's numerous waterproof pockets again, her fingers probing, feeling along every seam, every reinforced edge. They're cleverly, almost invisibly stitched into the very lining of a concealed inner pocket itself, so small it was almost impossible to detect. By touch alone was another even more incongruous object, a tiny, almost microscopic data flash drive wrapped tightly protectively in several layers of black waterproof electrical tape. She peeled the tape away carefully, her breath held tight in her chest. No official markings, no serial number, no manufacturer's label, just a single tiny, almost invisible, hand-painted red dot on one side. The kind she knew from her specialized narcotics interdiction training that high-level international smugglers often use to discreetly track undocumented high-value contraband shipments completely offline, utterly untraceable, by conventional means, a Ghost in the digital machine. "How the hell did this get on you, Ghost?" she muttered, her mind racing, sifting through a dozen impossible, terrifying scenarios. Who put it there, and why? Mason Carter, the grizzled, quiet fisherman, who had, with a mixture of instinctive kindness and profound curiosity, been hovering unobtrusively near the doorway throughout Ghost's entire veterinary examination, now stepped hesitantly, respectfully closer. "Ma'am, Officer Vega," he said, his voice low, his gaze fixed on the tiny, ominous flash drive in Danny's hand. "When I first found him out there, like I told you, he wasn't just swimming randomly, treading water, hoping for rescue. He was headed somewhere specific, southeast, dead southeast, like he had a definite, urgent destination in mind, and nothing, not even a bloody hurricane, was going to stop him." "He did, Mr. Carter," Danny said quietly, her voice barely a whisper as she turned the tiny, innocuous-looking flash drive over and over in her trembling palm, a cold, hard knot of dread and dawning, terrible understanding tightening in her stomach. "He most certainly did. Afama, back at her own precinct hours later, after a tense, circular, and ultimately unproductive initial debriefing, with a skeptical Captain Reynolds and an even more skeptical DEA liaison officer, Danny, made an urgent off-the-books call to a trusted contact in the department's overstretched, underfunded cybercrimes unit, requesting an immediate discrete priority analysis of the recovered GPS tracker's unique serial code and any associated ping data. The young sleep-deprived tech who called her back less than 10 minutes later sounded as if he'd just seen a ghost himself. His voice hushed, almost fearful, as if he were afraid someone, somewhere, might be listening in on their supposedly secure line. "Officer Vega, you are not going to frickin' believe this," he stammered, his voice low, conspiratorial. "Try me, Jimmy," Danny said, her own voice tight with anticipation. "That model of tracker, it's top-shelf encrypted military-grade stuff. Custom-made. The kind of untraceable tech used by the major international cartels, the Tier 1 players. We've only ever seen it twice before in this entire region. Both times it was recovered from scuttled ghost vessels that had been running multi-ton loads of high-purity narcotics and probably human cargo directly up from the Yucatan Peninsula. But here's the really crazy part, Vega. The unique embedded ID code on your specific tracker, it pinged once earlier today. An active encrypted location, ping about 85 nautical miles southeast from your current approximate position, middle of damn nowhere. Then it went dark again. So Ghost had been tracking it, or more chillingly, it had been tracking him." The tech paused, then continued, his voice even lower, more urgent. "Vega, what the hell is really going on down there? This ain't no ordinary lost dog story, is it?" Danny looked out through the grimy window of the precinct break room, her gaze fixed on the distant, indifferent blue of the Gulf, stretching endlessly, enigmatically to the far horizon. Then she looked back at Ghost, who sat patiently, watchfully at her feet, his intelligent amber eyes fixed on her face, waiting. "I'm not entirely sure yet, Jimmy," she said slowly, her mind a maelstrom of conflicting theories and terrifying possibilities. "But whatever it is, I don't think we're anywhere near done yet, not by a long shot." That night, back in the chaotic, comforting squalor of her own small apartment, Danny sat on the worn linoleum floor, surrounded by a semicircle of overflowing case files, nautical charts, and blurry satellite images. Ghost lay nearby, his breathing deep, and even now finally succumbing to a healing sleep. Though his ears still twitched, occasionally his senses ever alert even in slumber. His eyes, when they flickered open, followed her every movement as she meticulously, painstakingly flipped through page after page of official reports, witness statements, and intelligence summaries. The tiny, innocuous-looking flash drive, recovered from Ghost's vest, had proven to be an absolute goldmine of actionable intelligence-encrypted GPS logs, detailing the movements of multiple unidentified vessels, covertly recorded audio files of hushed, urgent conversations in heavily accented Spanish and Portuguese, and a series of time-stamped high-resolution photographs of what appeared to be heavily armed men unloading unmarked cargo containers onto smaller, faster boats under the cover of darkness. And most chillingly, a detailed handwritten ledger containing a list of coordinates, drop-off points, and what looked like coded payment schedules. She pulled up the thick, already dog-eared case file from the disastrous, failed joint operation 2 nights earlier. The intelligence supporting that raid, she now realized with a fresh surge of anger and frustration, had dried up far too quickly, far too conveniently. Their main confidential informant, the one who had supposedly provided the initial crucial tip-off, had gone completely inexplicably silent a full 48 hours before the scheduled raid. And then when the cartel's go-fast boat had capsized during the chaotic storm-lashed pursuit, the one person they had desperately, critically needed to apprehend, to recover alive. Elena Reyes, the brave, terrified young woman who had originally courageously risked everything to approach them to tip them off about the cartel's operations, had simply utterly vanished. They had officially assumed she had drowned in the storm, another tragic anonymous casualty of the brutal, unending war on drugs. But Danny had never fully, truly believed that. Some nagging, intuitive part of her, some cop's sixth sense, had always whispered that Elena's disappearance was too neat, too convenient. And now her ghost had swum against all conceivable odds through over 100 miles of open, hostile water to a position not far from where Elena Reyes might very well have last been seen alive. What if she wasn't dead? What if by some miracle she was still out there alive, waiting, hoping? She grabbed her battered laptop, inserted the tiny flash drive, her fingers surprisingly steady now, and opened the encrypted GPS log file. The tracking system it revealed was incredibly sophisticated military grade, far better, far more advanced than anything the local, relatively unsophisticated Gulf Coast cartels usually employed. This was the work of a major international syndicate, a Tier 1 organization with vast resources and global reach. The last known coordinates, the vessel's recorded movement patterns, a detailed unbroken track line, starting perilously near the treacherous, storm-swept cove where Ghost had gone missing during the raid, and ending abruptly just a few miles offshore from the precise location where Mason Carter had so miraculously found Ghost, swimming exhausted but still resolutely stubbornly on course. She looked down at her sleeping partner, at his scarred, noble head, at the faint, rhythmic rise and fall of his powerful chest. "Is that where you were going, my brave boy?" She whispered, her voice thick with a dawning, almost unbearable hope. "Is that what you found out there? Is she still alive?" Ghost's tail thumped once, twice against the worn carpet, a soft, deliberate, almost conscious movement, as if he understood, even in his deep, exhausted sleep, exactly what she was asking, what she was hoping. It was for Danny Vega all the confirmation she needed. "Okay, partner," Danny whispered, a new fierce, almost desperate resolve hardening her eyes, her jaw, as she slowly, purposefully stood up. "Okay, let's go finish this. Let's go get her." By sunrise the next morning, Danny Vega, fueled by black coffee, adrenaline, and a desperate burgeoning hope, was standing in front of the main marine operations, planning board at the precinct, a battered thermal coffee cup in one hand, a thick black marker in the other. A growing, chaotic pile of nautical charts, title tables, weather reports, and satellite imagery printouts lay scattered like pieces of a complex, high-stakes puzzle across the large briefing table. Ghost, his strength visibly, almost miraculously returning with every passing hour, lay quietly, patiently beside her. His body relaxed, but his intelligent amber eyes alert, watchful, following her every movement, her every gesture as she worked. She'd spent half the sleepless, caffeine-fueled night meticulously, obsessively overlaying the detailed GPS data recovered from the flash drive with the official archived radar logs from the Coast Guard's regional monitoring stations from the night of the storm. 3 lukewarm cups of burnt, acrid precinct coffee, later her eyes gritty with exhaustion, her head pounding, she finally triumphantly found it. A small, faint, almost invisible, irregular blip on the radar screen, moving erratically, furtively through a known, notorious radar dead zone, a treacherous stretch of water often exploited by smugglers. No registered, legitimate vessel should have been anywhere near that area, not in those appalling weather conditions. No fishing boat, no recreational craft, no commercial shipping. "That's it," she muttered, her voice a hoarse, excited whisper, as she traced the faint, ghostly path of the unidentified vessel with the tip of her black marker. "That's a classic go-fast boat signature. Low profile, high speed, hugging the blind spot between those 2 unmonitored buoyed sectors. Running dark." She reached for her constantly ringing phone, quickly, almost impatiently, dialing Mason Carter's familiar number. When he finally answered, his voice was rough, thick with sleep. "Mr. Carter, it's Officer Vega again. Sorry to bother you so early. That area where you found Ghost?" she asked without any preamble, getting straight to the point. "The currents out there, was he swimming directly against them or with them?" "Against him, officer. Definitely against him." Mason sounded more awake now, his fisherman's mind instantly alert to the nautical implications of her question. "Strong southerly current out there that morning, ma'am. Tide was pushing hard to the east, too. Your dog, he was fighting it every damn inch of the way, swimming straight into it, like he was determined to make headway south no matter what." She thanked him, hung up, and stared intently at the complex annotated map again, her mind racing the pieces of the puzzle beginning to fall with a chilling, exciting precision into place. If Ghost had indeed been swimming towards that unidentified, suspicious radar vessel signal, if he'd tracked it relentlessly for countless hours, for untold miles against a powerful, exhausting current, then someone or something on that mystery boat had been critically, vitally important enough for him to nearly kill himself, to push himself to the very brink of his incredible endurance trying to reach it. She quickly, almost frantically, pulled up the regional missing persons database on her departmental terminal, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Elena Reyes's young, innocent, hopeful face stared back at her from the official ID photograph. 19 years old, soft, intelligent brown eyes, a shy, tentative half smile. A first-generation college student working 2 jobs to pay her tuition, who'd been tragically, naively working as a cocktail server at a glitzy, upscale downtown nightclub that was, Danny now knew, a known frequent haunt for high-level cartel affiliates and money launderers. Elena had approached Danny terrified but resolute just 3 short, fateful weeks ago. Her voice trembling, her hands shaking, saying she'd overheard something. Something big, something dangerous. A new ultra-secret smuggling route, names, dates, cargo manifests. And now Elena Reyes was officially missing, presumed drowned, another tragic statistic after the joint raid had gone so catastrophically, so inexplicably sideways. But Danny in her gut had never fully truly believed that official convenient narrative. And now Ghost, her incredible Ghost, had swum with an almost superhuman endurance through 100 miles of raging open water to a precise location not far from where Elena Reyes might very well have last been seen alive. What if she wasn't dead? What if by some unbelievable slender miracle she was still out there, waiting, hoping, praying? By mid-morning, Danny, having pulled every string she possessed, called in every outstanding favor, and engaged in a heated, ultimately successful shouting match with a reluctant, bureaucratically obstructive Captain Reynolds, who had only grudgingly relented after a direct, forceful intervention from a suddenly very interested, very motivated Department of Homeland Security liaison, had somehow managed to commandeer a small, fast, heavily armed coastal patrol boat. Ghost, his strength almost visibly returning with every passing hour, his body thrumming with a renewed, palpable sense of urgent purpose, sat proudly, almost regally in the bow, his noble head held high, his intelligent amber eyes scanning the vast, empty expanse of water with a preternatural, unwavering focus, as if he could see, could sense things far beyond human perception. Brent Carson, a fellow K-9 officer from a neighboring precinct, an old friend, an occasional partner from their academy days, stood on the sun-drenched dock. His arms crossed, a look of profound, undisguised skepticism on his face as he watched her make her final preparations for departure. "You know this is certifiably insane, right, Vega?" He called out over the growing throaty roar of the patrol boat's powerful twin engines. "Clinically nuts. Yep, pretty much." Danny acknowledged, a grim, tight smile playing on her lips as she checked the boat's GPS unit, one last meticulous time programming in the last known coordinates from the recovered flash drive. "You're seriously following a dog, a half-drowned, traumatized dog, back out into the middle of the goddamn open ocean based on a hunch of prayer and a couple of blurry radar blips?" Brent persisted, shaking his head in disbelief, though there was a grudging admiration in his eyes. "Seems like it, Carson. Seems like it." Brent Carson shook his head again slowly, but there was no real biting criticism in his voice this time, only a deep, weary understanding of the unbreakable, often inexplicable bond between a handler and their K-9 partner. "You really, truly think he found something important out there?" Danny, something worth all this? Danny looked at Ghost, who sat a magnificent tawny statue, perfectly still, except for his expressive ears, which kept swiveling like sensitive radar dishes towards the vast beckoning expanse of open water to the south. "He didn't swim away from something out there, Brent," she said quietly, her voice filled with an absolute unshakable conviction. "He swam towards it, and that my friend makes all the damn difference in the world." Carson nodded slowly, a thoughtful, almost wistful expression on his face. "Then I guess you better trust your partner Vega." Implicitly. "Always do, Carson," Danny said, her gaze meeting Ghost's, a silent, profound understanding passing between them. "Always have. Always will." With a final curt wave to her friend, she eased the powerful patrol boat out of its slip and into the sun-dappled, choppy waters of the Gulf. Her course set for the distant, uncertain south, her heart a chaotic, tumultuous mixture of desperate hope, gnawing fear, and an unwavering, almost terrifying faith in the extraordinary, indomitable spirit of the magnificent animal standing sentinel in her bow. The journey south took long, grueling, monotonous hours, an endless, unchanging vista of unforgiving deep blue water under a relentless, blazing, unforgiving sun. Nothing but the vast, indifferent ocean in every direction, stretching to a hazy, shimmering, seemingly infinite horizon. Ghost incredibly remained alert, watchful, almost preternaturally patient, the entire time his body braced against the pitching and rolling of the small boat. His gaze never wavering, his focus absolute except for his intelligent amber eyes, which never ever stopped scanning, searching, questing. Then around nautical mile 92, as the sun began its slow, inexorable descent towards the western horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues of orange and purple, everything changed. It happened in a single, electrifying, heart-stopping instant. Ghost's entire lean, powerful body tensed, every muscle suddenly rigidly coiled. His noble head snapped sharply upward, his ears locked rigidly forward, his tail held straight out, stiff as an iron bar. A low guttural whine, a sound Danny had learned to recognize as his most urgent, most critical alert, escaped his throat. A sound not of pain, not of fear, but of profound, absolute, undeniable recognition. He moved with a sudden explosive burst of energy to the port side railing of the patrol boat, his powerful front paws scrambling onto the gunwale, barking now with a frantic, desperate urgency, an intensity that Danny recognized with a jolt from hundreds of their past life or death search and rescue operations. She cut the engines immediately, her own heart hammering a frantic tattoo against her ribs, grabbing her powerful gyro-stabilized binoculars, her shaking hands following Ghost's unwavering, laser-like line of sight out across the now darkening white-capped water. At first nothing, just the endless, rolling, indifferent expanse of the sea. Then a tiny, almost invisible flash of incongruous, unnatural orange against the vast, deep blue. Not much, just a fleeting, elusive sliver of color, but definitely, unequivocally not a natural phenomenon for these desolate, empty waters. Danny eased the patrol boat forward again, slowly, cautiously, her senses hyper-alert, every nerve ending screaming. The indistinct shape grew clearer, larger, more defined with each yard they gained. A life raft, small, battered, weather-beaten, almost certainly designed for only one or two occupants. And inside, slumped against the inflated rubber, a single small, almost childlike figure. Motionless. Her hands shook so violently she could barely control them as she reached for the radio microphone. "Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. This is Police K9 Patrol Unit 17. I have visual confirmation on a solo marine vessel. Appears to be a small orange life raft with one unresponsive occupant. Request immediate urgent air medevac and SAR assistance." She rattled off the precise GPS coordinates, her voice surprisingly, almost unnaturally steadier than she felt, then dropped anchor the heavy chain, rattling noisily in the sudden eerie silence. Ghost barked again, louder this time, more insistent, more urgent, his entire body practically vibrating with a contained explosive tension. The figure in the rapidly deflating life raft stirred slightly, a feeble, almost imperceptible movement, as Danny, having launched the patrol boat's small inflatable Zodiac, approached it cautiously through the choppy, darkening waves. A girl, barely conscious, her delicate skin an angry, blistered, flaming red from prolonged, merciless sun exposure. Her lips cracked, swollen and bleeding. Her clothes, once brightly colored, were now stiff with dried salt, tattered, almost shredded. But around her slender, fragile neck, glinting faintly in the last dying rays of the setting sun, hung a small, familiar, intricately carved silver charm in the unmistakable, delicate shape of a single angel's wing, Elena Reyes. The girl's swollen, sun-scorched eyelids fluttered weakly open as Danny skillfully maneuvered the Zodiac alongside the leaking, crippled raft. A flicker of dazed, uncomprehending recognition followed immediately by a wave of profound, almost unbearable, incredulous disbelief crossed her ravaged, youthful face. You found me?" She whispered, her voice a dry, hoarse, almost inaudible rasp, like sandpaper on rough wood. He found me." Elena was barely coherent, dangerously close to unconsciousness, as Danny, with a strength born of desperation and adrenaline, carefully, gently hauled her slight, almost weightless body out of the rapidly sinking life raft and into the relative safety of the Zodiac. Her young body felt terrifyingly light, desiccated, almost skeletal, from days of merciless sun, relentless dehydration, and utter hopeless despair. Her bruised, bleeding fingers clung with a desperate, almost convulsive tenacity to the rough, abrasive rubber siding of the doomed life raft, even as Danny gently but firmly pulled her away, as if she couldn't quite bring herself to believe that rescue, that survival was truly finally real. But she kept repeating one thing over and over and over again, like a desperate prayer, like a sacred mantra, like a dawning, unbelievable revelation. He found me. He came back for me. He found me. By the time Danny, her own body aching with exhaustion, her emotions shredded, managed to get the gravely ill, barely conscious girl back to the main patrol boat, Ghost was nearly frantic with a strange, contained, almost unbearable excitement. He paced the narrow deck relentlessly, whining pitifully, desperately, trying to see over the high railing. But when Elena's small, battered, sun-ravaged head finally blessedly appeared over the gunwale, his entire agitated demeanor changed in an instant. He went completely, utterly still. He sat down slowly, deliberately, and he watched her, his intelligent amber eyes filled with an intensity, a tenderness, a profound, almost human understanding that brought fresh tears to Danny's already overflowing eyes. "Elena," Danny said gently, her voice thick with emotion, as she carefully, tenderly helped the gravely weakened girl onto the deck of the patrol boat, settling her gently against a pile of soft life preservers. "Elena, can you hear me? Do you recognize him? Do you know this dog?" Elena blinked slowly, her gaze unfocused, as if she were trying to decide if Ghost, if Danny, if this entire improbable rescue was real, or just another cruel, elaborate hallucination conjured by her sun-addled, traumatized mind. Her cracked, swollen lips twitched, attempting a smile that was more a grimace of pain. "See, yes, that's him," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the sigh of the wind and the gentle lapping of waves against the hull. "That's the dog from the other boat. He tried to save me then, too." "What happened out there, Elena?" Danny asked softly, urgently, supporting the girl's frail, trembling weight as she gently offered her a small sip of fresh water from a canteen. "The night of the raid. What really happened?" Elena winced, her small body seizing for a moment in a paroxysm of remembered terror before she nodded weakly. I never made it off their boat, the fast one. When everything started going crazy, when the storm hit, when your boats appeared, the smugglers, the bad men, they grabbed me. They dragged me screaming to another much smaller boat, a fishing trawler hidden in the mangroves. They told me if I screamed again, if I tried to escape, they'd leave me for the sharks. Danny's jaw tightened, her knuckles white, as she fought back a surge of cold, murderous rage. They kept me hidden, locked in a dark, filthy fish hold like an animal for days. I lost track of time. Elena's voice cracked, a dry, racking sob escaping her lips. Then the big storm, the hurricane, it hit us full force. I don't think they knew how to handle their boat in those terrible mountainous waves. We got separated from their main mothership, the one with all the cargo. They started to panic. They threw me and a few supplies into that little life raft. They just cut me loose, left me to die out here alone. And Ghost, Danny prompted gently. The dog. Now, where was he? Elena nodded weakly, her eyes surprisingly focusing on Ghost with a look of profound, almost reverent gratitude. He came out of nowhere, just appeared in the water beside the raft after they left me. I saw him swimming so strong, so determined. He tried to get into the raft with me, but he couldn't. It was too high, too unstable. So he just swam. He swam right next to me for hours, maybe days, I don't know. He never left my side, not until a huge wave, a monster hit us, and he just disappeared. I thought he was gone, drowned, like me. Danny looked at Ghost, who sat perfectly unnervingly still, his intelligent, unwavering gaze never leaving Elena's pale, tear-streaked face. You weren't lost out there, were you, partner? She whispered, her voice choked with a fresh wave of awe and overwhelming love for this incredible, impossible animal. You weren't just trying to survive. You were with her. You were with her the whole damn time. You never gave up. Within 30 minutes, the distinctive, rhythmic, reassuring thump, thump, thump of a United States Coast Guard rescue helicopter, its powerful searchlight cutting a brilliant swathe through the rapidly gathering darkness, reverberated through the salt-laden air. Highly trained paramedics, their movements swift, efficient, descended like angels from the belly of the machine, secured the now unconscious Elena Reyes carefully to a specialized extraction stretcher, and expertly hoisted her up, attaching oxygen lines and IV drips before she had even reached the relative safety of the helicopter's cabin. You're safe now, Elena. Danny called up, her voice nearly lost in the deafening roar of the rotors as the helicopter prepared to depart. You're going to be okay. Elena, her eyes fluttering open for a brief lucid moment, managed one last weak look down toward the deck of the patrol boat. Tell the dog, gracias. She called, her faint voice almost completely lost in the overwhelming rotor wash. Tell him, thank you. Ghost, as if understanding her faint, heartfelt words, barked once, just once, a short, sharp affirmative sound, as if to say he already knew. His mission, it seemed, was finally truly complete. The immediate complex aftermath of Elena Reyes's miraculous rescue and the recovery of the explosive intelligence contained on the flash drive, Ghost had so bravely, so inexplicably moved with the bewildering, often frustrating speed that these kinds of multi-agency, high-stakes investigations always do in the upper echelons of law enforcement. Elena, after several days of intensive medical treatment and psychological debriefing, was stabilized, her physical recovery slow but steady. Her detailed, corroborated testimony, given in a quiet, secure room in an undisclosed federal facility with a specialist trauma counselor always present, not only matched every damning detail they already knew about the sophisticated, ruthless smuggling operation from their recovered data, but provided so much more names, routes, specific identifying features of key cartel operatives, faces and voices she had seen and heard during her terrifying captivity. She remembered critical coordinates, described hushed coded conversations, identified previously unknown shell corporations. The information on the flash drive, cross-referenced with Elena's testimony, confirmed it all. Encrypted audio logs of operational planning meetings, detailed GPS route maps of clandestine shipping lanes, a full comprehensive list of secure drop-off points and transshipment hubs used to smuggle not just narcotics, but illegal weapons and, most disturbingly, human cargo along the entire length of the vulnerable Gulf Coast. Ghost, it became terrifyingly, undeniably clear, hadn't just saved Elena Rhea's life. He had, through his incredible courage and almost unbelievable endurance, single-handedly delivered the crucial, irrefutable evidence that would ultimately break open a massive ongoing federal investigation. An investigation that spanned at least 3 states and implicated powerful, previously untouchable figures on both sides of the border. Your dog, Officer Vega, the grim-faced, tight-lipped senior DHS representative, a man whose eyes had seen far too much, told Danny later that long, exhausting night, after a marathon 12-hour debriefing session, just effectively did the complex, dangerous, and highly classified work of at least 5 experienced federal agents and a state-of-the-art aerial surveillance plane. We still don't entirely understand how. Danny didn't smile. She didn't offer any explanations, any theories. She simply looked over at Ghost, who had finally truly deeply fallen asleep in a quiet, shadowed corner of the precinct's chaotic, noisy break room, his scarred, noble head resting on his massive paws, his breathing slow, deep and even. "He's not just my dog, sir," she said quietly, her voice filled with a fierce, unwavering pride. "He's my partner." 2 days later, after the initial storm of federal agents' official reports and classified briefings had finally mercifully begun to subside, Danny walked Ghost slowly, leisurely back to the familiar weathered wooden dock, where it had all so improbably, so miraculously begun. The second chance was there, tied securely in its usual slip. Mason Carter on deck, methodically, patiently polishing the already gleaming chrome rail along the bow. His movements economical, practice timeless. "Heard the news on the Marine radio this morning. Officer," he said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble as he tipped his faded, sweat-stained baseball cap in a gesture of quiet respect. "The girl, Elena, she made it. She's gonna be okay." "She did, Mr. Carter," Danny replied, a genuine, heartfelt smile finally reaching her tired eyes. "She most certainly did. Thanks in no small part to you. Honey, wasn't me who swam 100 damn miles through a hurricane, ma'am." Mason set his gaze drifting towards Ghost, who was now sniffing with a casual, almost dismissive interest around a discarded coil of heavy mooring rope. His plumed tail finally truly relaxed now that his critical, all-consuming mission was well and truly complete. "That dog of yours, he's something else entirely. Something special." "Yeah, Mr. Carter," Danny said softly, her voice filled with an emotion too deep, too profound for mere words. "He really truly is." Ghost didn't get a formal departmental ceremony for his incredible life-saving actions. There were no flashing camera crews waiting expectantly at the dock. No flower-draped podiums, no stirring laudatory speeches from grateful politicians or high-ranking police officials. There were just a few quiet, heartfelt nods of profound respect around the precinct. A couple of extra surreptitiously slipped beef jerky treats under her desk from appreciative fellow officers, a long, silent, knowing look of shared understanding from a humbled Captain Reynolds. But none of that superficial, fleeting recognition mattered in the slightest to Ghost. He didn't work for applause, for public accolades, for official commendations. He worked, Danny knew, for that quiet, almost invisible look of approval Danny gave him now, the one that simply powerfully said, "I see you." The look that acknowledged that she'd followed him, trusted him, believed in him, even when all logic, all reason screamed otherwise. The look that understood that their bond, their partnership, wasn't just a word, a concept, but a living, breathing, unbreakable connection, forged through 1,000 small shared moments of quiet understanding and tested, proven in the unforgiving, fiery crucible of profound, life-altering crisis. A single stiff, official-looking letter arrived from the departmental administration 3 days later, typed formal, utterly devoid of any genuine emotion, coldly bureaucratic. Wondering, the recent unconventional actions of K-9 Unit Number 47 Ghost, it stated, have been duly acknowledged by the Department of Homeland Security and subsequently forwarded for internal review and possible future commendation. However, due to the highly sensitive and ongoing classifiable nature of the intercepted intelligence data and the associated active criminal investigation, any form of public recognition or media disclosure regarding this matter is strongly discouraged and officially not advised at this present time. That was it. No parade, no medal, no public mention of the multiple lives saved the catastrophic disaster so narrowly averted. Danny read the sterile impersonal memo, once a bitter, cynical smile twisting her lips, then folded it precisely in half and slid it without comment into a dusty, rarely opened desk drawer filled with other forgotten, unacknowledged departmental commendations and commendations. Later that same week, on a rare, well-deserved day off, she took Ghost to their favorite deserted stretch of windswept, unspoiled beach, not for rigorous training, not for a demanding operational drill, but just to let him run, to let him be a dog for a few precious, uncomplicated hours. The late afternoon sun, a molten gold disk sinking slowly towards the western horizon, painted the shimmering water with streaks of fire, the incoming tide sighing gently rhythmically against the cool, damp sand. Ghost, his powerful body a blur of joyous, unrestrained motion, sprinted through the shallow, sun-warmed surf, kicking up plumes of iridescent spray, barking once-twice with what sounded to Danny's ear like pure, unadulterated, canine joy. Danny sat on a large weathered piece of driftwood, its surface bleached silver by sun and salt, just watching him, a quiet, profound sense of peace of rightness settling over her weary soul. When he finally eventually returned to her, dripping, panting, his magnificent coat gleaming in the golden light, he dropped a soggy, sand-encrusted tennis ball expectantly at her feet. She smiled a genuine, unrestrained smile that reached deep into her tired, grateful eyes. "Now you want to play fetch, you crazy, magnificent bastard?" Ghost sat, looked up at her, his pink tongue lolling, his intelligent amber eyes bright, expectant, alive. For a precious, timeless moment, the heavy weight of the badge, the incessant crackle of the police radio, the grim, unending reality of her chosen profession all disappeared. There was just the gentle whisper of the wind, the clean, sharp tang of salt in the air, the rhythmic, soothing sound of the waves, and a dog. A dog who had swum farther, fought harder, endured more than any training, any protocol, any human could ever have prepared him for. Not because duty in its strictest sense had demanded it, not because he had been ordered to, but simply because somewhere out there, in the vast, indifferent darkness, someone had needed him. And Ghost, being Ghost, had answered the call. Back at the station, the unofficial whispered legend of K9. Ghost inevitably, inexorably grew, not because Danny ever told the full, unvarnished story, but because stories like this, stories of impossible courage, of inexplicable loyalty, of an unbreakable bond that defies all human understanding, have a way of spreading, of taking on a life, a mythology all their own. A young, tech-savvy Coast Guard officer's teenage daughter, who had been on the dock that day with her father, had surreptitiously snapped a blurry, out-of-focus cell phone photo of Elena Reyes's dramatic helicopter rescue with Ghost, a tiny, indistinct tan blur in the corner of the frame. She'd posted it on her social media feed with the simple, heartfelt caption, "This amazing dog literally swam over 100 miles through a hurricane to save this girl's life." You'll probably never hear about it on the mainstream news, but Warkishern hero dog Narana Ghost, Darlier unsung hero. It got 4.2 million views and counting. People didn't know the whole complex, incredible story, not really, but they felt it. They sensed its truth. And sometimes, Danny thought, sometimes that's more than enough.